Good afternoon and welcome to the Spokane City Council Committee meeting for Public Infrastructure, Environment, and Sustainability. I'm Council President Pro Tem Candace Mumm. I want to welcome you to our committee meeting, and I would like to introduce the co-chair of this committee, Councilmember Michael Cathcart, who will be leading us through the meeting today.
Thank you, Councilwoman Mumm. So we will kick off our meeting, and we'll start with an approval of the minutes from August 23rd. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Second. Is there a second? Perfect. We've got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 And opposed? Okay, motion's approved. Consent items for discussion. Are there any consent items that anybody's identified that they'd like to pull off for more discussion? Not seeing. Oh, Marlene?
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight two things for council. Item number 19 is our contract with GHD. That's on all the water planning. So if you wanted to discuss that, that will come forward. But we have been working with Kara and Brian McClatchy on that. But I just wanted to point that one out to you. And then number 22, you're going to get an email from John Sayers probably later today asking that you take this on the 4th. There's some concern about how long it will take to, how much lead time we need for the pipe to be ordered. So as quickly as we can get that one approved will help that project move forward. So that's the Geiger Boulevard contract. And John's here, and so is Marcia, if you have any questions on those items.
Great. Thank you, Marlene. Appreciate that. Is there either of those items anybody wants to hear more about or anything else on consent? I'm not seeing any hands. Okay, so we will then move along. So why don't we start with the Sustainability Action Plan resolution discussion. And Kara, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Good afternoon, council members. Thank you for having us here today. While Delaney is preparing to share her screen, I'm going to just quickly introduce what we're here to share with you. For those of you who have not yet met Delaney Carr has been our sustainability intern for the past 2 years, just over 2 years, and she's a senior at Gonzaga University, which she'll be introducing herself a bit here in a minute. Delaney has been working for the last 6 months on processing or helping. She's been leading the efforts to process our feedback from the community, and she's going to share with you some of those results. And then we're going to talk just briefly about the process over the next 4 weeks to get feedback from you and the administration for any additional revisions to the plan. So Delaney, if you want to go ahead, I'll let you take over.
Yeah, thank you, Kara. Hi, everyone. My name's Delaney. I'm a sustainability intern for City Council and work with Kara. And I've closely been working with the Sustainability Action Subcommittee for the past 2 years. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about an overview of the public feedback we've received about the Sustainability Action Plan. There we go. Okay. So this engagement process has started in April and has run through September. And through that time, it's been my job to collect and record all public feedback through our various workshops, utility inserts, survey responses, and other forms of engagement such as media, emails, and letters. And so the goal of this process was to collect feedback from those in the Spokane community to learn and hear what they care about and want prioritized by City Council to address any forms of issues relating to the environment or other issues that they find are important. So this is a top 10 list of summary of themes that are most supported by people who responded to the survey. And number 1 is reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So this was the most commonly brought up theme of support that people do want to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Spokane. Next one was water conservation and river and aquifer protection. Another is increasing public infrastructure such as public transportation, bike infrastructure, and electrical vehicle infrastructure. And number 5, while not really relating to the environment or sustainability specifically, affordable housing came up a lot at the end of this engagement process and is a big priority for others to be addressed as well. If you see number 10 at the bottom is plan adoption now and quickly. So others do want this plan adopted and they want it as soon as possible. And so I did a short, brief calculation at the bottom, which is just showing that these top 10 priorities of support make up more than 50% of other themes brought up as well. So a lot of people care about these themes. And this question I have up on the screen is just a question showing overall support of the plan. And we received a 4.2 star rating out of 5 over the course of this public engagement process through the survey. And in addition to the top 10 list that I showed previously, I did a specific breakdown of top priorities for each sector of the plan. So as you can see over here in the yellow circle, it's emphasizing renewable energy, which is the buildings and energy group. It was a top 10 action and will be a top 1 priority for the buildings and energy work group to address in the implementation process. Same with over here, water resources. Water conservation was a top theme and will also be a #1 priority for the water resource group. I'm just going to take a few seconds for everyone to look over these sectors and to see what the top 2 priorities for each group will be. Okay, I'm going to continue to the next slide. So in addition to those of support, we did receive feedback and made space in the survey for people to voice their concerns or what they do not support in the plan. The #1 for that was banning natural gas hookups in new buildings, which based on this public feedback, we have removed it from the plan and is no longer included in the buildings and energy sector. Another concern that was brought up was if this plan will increase the cost of living in Spokane, if it will make it harder or more expensive for people to live here or for people to come move here. And then another was prioritizing the economy over environmental issues. So some voiced concerns that they do not want the economy prioritized over environmental issues. And some even say that they want a more aggressive plan than the one that we're updating. And again, this calculation at the bottom is just showing that these top 7 concerns made up 66% of these concerns. And you can see while we got a lot of support and have a lot of room for concerns, the concerns in opposition were smaller than those that support. So overall conclusion is that based on this public feedback, it seems as the Spokane community wants a sustainability action plan. And in addition to that, there were valid concerns with the plan that will be included in the implementation process with SAS work groups to address and listen to as they plan for implementation. And the SAP is a living document, so it will be revisited and revised as Spokane grows and changes as well. And the next steps for this is using this public engagement as a guide for the SAS work groups to see and learn what the public has to say about the plan. So it will be a guide for implementation as well. And just a couple quotes that I've included here to give credit for those who filled out the survey. One said that this is an opportunity for Spokane to be a leader in sustainability and human flourishing. And another said this community will grow healthy if the city invests in people, community, and the environment. This could be the best city of the future. So with that, that concludes my presentation, and I'll open it up for questions if anyone has any.
Does anybody have any questions for, Councilman Stratton?
First, I want to thank you both for the work that you put into this whole plan. I was happy to attend one of the workshops, and I've said it many times, I've just been so impressed with your work. And not only that, but the relationships that you established while you were out in the community, really trying hard to get feedback from the public, because that's what it's all about. So I guess my question is, are there ongoing discussions about any of that low-hanging fruit, things that we can do now from the plan, or do we wait? I always like to see a little bit of action after a plan like this. So thought I'd give you a minute to talk about where we go from here and anything that we can start working on soon.
Yeah. That's good. Great question. And one of the pieces of feedback I received during the last 6 months was to put some sort of status indication on the strategies that we've outlined, which the final draft of this plan does now have indications in the areas where we're already starting the work. And so I love that question, and I think that there are a number of things that we could do right away that maybe are not very costly, or that are already being activity that's already being spearheaded by partners or other agencies within the community that we can continue to support. So in terms of next steps, we are tentatively, and the resolution that Council President and I have drafted, and it's in your packet today, that the idea is to have, for the next 4 weeks, Council to provide, read through the updated plan and provide any, well, I guess I'm here to ask you, how do you want to provide feedback to me? We met with Marlene's Public Works team last week, and we are on schedule to meet with the Mayor's Cabinet on the 5th to ask them the same questions. How do they want to participate and engage over this final draft? And then the idea is for Council to vote on the resolution to adopt the SAP, the Sustainability Action Plan, in late October.
I have a question. So you're going to meet with the mayor's executive leadership team, is that correct? Is there any way that council members could attend or could be part of that discussion? I know we'd have to limit it to 3 or it becomes a public meeting, but I don't know if council members.
Sure.
I mean, it might be easier for you to get everybody in the same room to get that kind of feedback.
Absolutely. Council President, I believe, is already on the calendar to attend, but I'm happy to, I think, well, Marlene has been the person who's been helping me coordinate that, so I guess maybe Marlene would be the right person to answer that question.
Yeah, I'm happy to facilitate that, and I do believe that Council President was already on, so I don't see any problem with adding a couple of other council members. I don't know exactly where the cabinet will be in terms of providing feedback at the meeting, Councilmember Stratton, but they certainly want to hear about that, and they'd like to see some of the highlights from the plan. Understand how council intends to move it forward, so we're open to that discussion.
Are there any other questions for Kara or Delaney? I am not seeing any other hands. Kara, just real quick, how many unique responses did you guys get to that survey?
It's somewhere around 800, and we just closed it out today. So I'd have to double check, but yes, we
ballpark
somewhere really close to 800.
Okay, no, that's great. All right, well, I'm not seeing any other hands, so we can move on to our next item. Thank you guys very much for your presentation. And if there are obviously more questions, we can follow up offline. So next up, we've got an update on S3, R3, and I've got Council President Beggs here, but I also see that Todd Coleman's on. Is he going to be given the update?
He is, yes. So this is formerly called the West Plains Public Development Authority, and they have rebranded themselves, but I'll turn it over, and then we're going to hear from the interim executive director at the University District Public Development Authority, Juliet Sinistera, after Todd. But Todd, take it away.
Thank you, Council President, Council members. So I did not prepare a presentation, so I'll just give you some updates on some of the things going on in the West Plains, and if you have any questions, I would love to try to answer those for you. So we've got a lot going on right now. We're really focused in on infrastructure as always. We are super excited. We'll finish this week our 30,750 square foot air cargo warehouse building that we started negotiating on about this time last year. So that building, starting October 14th, will see 1 aircraft a day. That aircraft will come in about 2 o'clock in the morning and will leave at 10 o'clock in the morning. So the good news about that is the trucks that'll be running, we're going to lease this building out to Amazon. They will be running trucks between the fulfillment center and this facility throughout the night. And they don't have to go through interchanges. They'll be using the newly constructed Geiger Boulevard, which you all had a big part in. So excited about that project. And then starting November 5th, they'll be running 2 planes a night. So we're excited to be a building owner here coming up real shortly. On the transportation side of things, we actually worked with DOT. We received about $260,000, and we are going to start as soon as our board, assuming our board approves it later this week, the West Plains Transportation Network Study. What this does is it looks at all the transportation network needs within the West Plains, including Airway Heights, City of Spokane, Spokane County, and touches the edges of Cheney and Medical Lake. And the plan here is to get all of those jurisdictions, including the tribes and Fairchild and STA and SRTC, to have a prioritized list of projects that we then can feed into SRTC's unified project list. And it will have all of those stakeholders signing on the dotted line that they all agree that those are the priorities going forward for designs and for funding. So we're really excited to get that project going too. There's been a lot of studies in the West Plains, but they haven't all been adopted. So we want to make sure that this one gets adopted. And we appreciate DOT's efforts in supporting us in that. We also just finished our stormwater master plan for our regional facilities in the West Plains. So we will now start in the funding process. A key part of implementing that regional stormwater, the regional stormwater facilities, is how that transportation network comes together. Because a lot of the conveyance of stormwater is either in pipes or in swells alongside the roadway. So wherever we plan to develop out the first components or elements of the transportation network is also where we want to create those regional facilities. So it all kind of feeds back into itself. And then we're also working on a wetland mitigation bank. The idea here is we have about 300 acres of wetlands that are in the West Plains. Wetlands and airports and development don't really go hand in hand. The airport's very concerned about anything that attracts wildlife. And so what our goal is to create south of here, at least 5 miles away, a mitigation bank in some area that's been grazed in the past. So all that cattle grazing would be removed. We would do some uplift in vegetation. And then in advance, this property would be available for development as we go forward. So the idea here is to be able to give developers certainty for low quality wetlands and to give them an option where they can basically purchase these credits in advance. Also been working with your staff at the city. We're pleased to hear that they've reached an agreement as far as the third water reservoir up here near Spokane International Airport. And as we were developing out our roadways for the warehouse, I know they were able to upgrade some of their water lines. So all good work there. If you go out in the West Plains, you're going to see a number of businesses opening here before too long. So North 40 is hopefully going to open October 1. They got their signs up. It's pretty full at this point. So keep our fingers crossed that they'll be ready to go. Looks great. And in their parking lot, Multicare has already opened an urgent care facility there. And Mod Pizza will be joining right next to Multicare here in the very near future. They're just starting on their tenant improvements. Wish we had a sit-in, dine-in restaurant, but I guess we're going to have to wait for one of those for a little while longer. Selkirk Pharma will open next March. Really pleased with those guys. They're going to have 330 employees with a median wage of over $89,000 per year. So a great customer for the West Plains. And those are folks, we've asked them what sort of training needs do they have, and they said, we're going to train those folks, but we pay them well because we don't want them to go anywhere. So should be some jobs for hopefully some folks local, so we don't add too much additional traffic to the highways. Douglas Industrial Park is still going gangbusters out there on Thomas Mallon and next to Electric Avenue or Geiger Boulevard. They have finished their first building. The second building is nearly complete, and the third building is moving well along. In total, that will be 1.4 million square feet of speculative warehouse. For us, that's good news because as we're out doing our marketing, it's a great opportunity to be able to put somebody into a building immediately. So we need those kinds of warehouses available. We're also looking forward to Project Gray, which is a logistics warehouse out in the corner of Geiger Boulevard and Hayford Road. That's about a 300,000 square foot logistics building. We expect Kenworth will get started on their facility next year. We keep saying that, but we think they're going to actually break ground next year. And then McKinstry and Puget Sound Pipe are getting really close to breaking ground. So we'll see if they can do that this year or again if that pushes into next year. We're also working with a new company, two new companies out of California and out of the Renton area, who are looking at developing lasers. They also have some really cool technology that uses UVC light, which actually is basically they put a strobe or a light into a restroom or an office, has a sensor on it, and as soon as the sensor senses there's nobody in the room, that light will kick on for 5 minutes, and after 5 minutes, it's killed all viruses in the room, including the COVID virus. So these guys are going out, they've developed this product, they've even got it in like a little scanner form now, where they can clean desktops and those types of things. They're going to a medical conference here in November, and I think that, you know, as long as it's a legitimate product, they're going to see a lot of demand for this. So we're working with them right now at the airport to get them into a temporary space and then to build them a warehouse longer term. So lots going on in the West Plains. I'm glad to answer any questions if you'd like.
I'm not seeing any hands. Todd, thank you very much for the update and overview of what's happening out there. It's hard to keep track of everything, so I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Council President, are we going to Juliet for the...
Yeah, so for those of you who didn't catch it, our former Executive Director, Lars Gilbert, took a position with Numerica this summer. And so we're in the process of searching for a new Executive Director. And Juliet Sinistera, who many of you know, who's a longtime person who's worked in Spokane and worked at the city, has taken over as the interim Executive Director. And I will just turn things over to you, Juliet. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Brianne. Yeah, I've been in this position since July. Things are moving fast and furious. City staff have been really helpful in kind of getting me up to speed. I'm meeting with Steve McDonald next week, and I'm looking forward to that. I have a quick little presentation, just 4 slides to share. I'm going to share. Yeah, let me move this. So I've been serving on the Fed Steering Committee with the youth side. Recently presented with the other 2 PDAs to the Washington State Transportation Commission. Again, I mentioned we're working closely with city staff and the other PDAs. We're really wanting to establish the protocols and processes around fiscal management and reporting of how the tax monies get distributed to the PDAs, particularly how the sales tax is looked at and collected. So I've been talking with Tanya Wallace. We're really hoping for a November date to start receiving those methodologies from the city. That's really crucial for the UDPDA and moving forward. There's a lot of kind of potential pressing capital investments that they would like to be making in the next year, and it'd be fantastic to be able to do a capital budget at the beginning of January based on those methodologies. And then also just really understanding how those numbers are generated and processed and how they can be audited if they were to be audited, just how to protect all of us on both ends moving forward on that. I've been talking with Chris Becker and Justin in planning about the parking management studies that they've been doing. They've been doing a parking utilization study. They were hoping to finish that up this fall once Eastern was back in session, but due to their inability to access certain equipment to finish that, it's being pushed to the beginning of 2022 to complete that. And once we have those numbers, really looking at how parking is being utilized right now throughout the South UD, there could start to be discussions around a general parking management strategy for the UD. We've been in initial discussions around a potential 6-month planning MOU with a private developer on a potential public-private partnership. We're initiating discussions around future collaborative UDRA developments with other public entities as well. And we have 2 studies that we're moving forward on. The first one is we're doing a parking structure feasibility study. Those of you that have been involved with the UD for years, I was on the development committee in 2016 and 17, and we were talking parking structures then. But we actually finally have some high-level feasibility studies going on, analyzing parking counts, costs, egress, ingress, that sort of thing on a couple sites in the UD. We're also moving forward with a TOD study with center-based planning and urban design, the same group, Jason Graff, that did the work for planning. We're having him look specifically at the Pine Street station, the BRT station there, and then how, build out at that end, and then also build out at the Sherman and Sprague could ideally encourage taking transit and pedestrian and more walking use as well. So that is moving forward. That's like a 4-month study. We've also, we're coordinating with city staff on a commerce grant as well around TOD. And we've just started working with the Gonzaga students, their senior project in civil engineering. They're going to be developing a UD bike ped plan for our south area. So I'm being supported nicely with Amanda and Colin Quinn, Hurst, and Mike Tressier at STA. So we're meeting regularly with those students. And then finally, we are talking with Boxcar, Catherine Miller and Kyle Tuig about potentially the UD PDA working with Boxcar to get kind of an initial lift of asphalt and maybe some initial curbing done along Riverside between Grant and Sherman. Boxcar is wanting to start marketing and leasing out properties in the spring, and they'd love it if that street was not just a dirt pile as it is right now. So we're trying to be creative and think out of the box and how we can move this forward more quickly on behalf of Boxcar. And potentially Boxcar might partner with the UD in agreement with the city to actually get those improvements completed. So with that, that is all I have.
This is Brian. I'm just going to add something that I know council is always super interested in, which is residential development in the South University District. And so you saw that photo of Boxcar, which is a very large apartment unit that's right at the south end of the University District Bridge. But there's also a pretty big development at Riverside and Brown, which is workforce level housing, and the potential to double in size just north of there. And then you might recall remembering farther east of but in the University District, the Riverbend project, which I'm thinking is about 300 units, something like that. It's pretty big. So there is quite a bit of housing going in the University District. I just want people to know that. So.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that real quick, Brian. So the Riverbend project is on hold right now due to escalating construction costs. So hopefully they can get back on track sooner rather than later. Both Dean Pape, who's doing the project on Brown, and Boxcar are interested in doing more housing in the UD. And I've also been approached by Scott Shapiro. He's with Eagle Rock Ventures. He's from Spokane originally, but he's in Seattle now. He does a lot of micro-unit housing around the country, actually, and a lot of times it's adjacent to university campuses. All three are really interested in doing more housing, but they also really want to see more street-level activation and more uses in the UD, I think, before they're going to jump the gun on too much more. So that's sort of a lot of discussion that we're having on the development committee is how can we encourage more ground floor uses to come in as well.
Councilwoman Mum?
Thank you. Hi, Juliet. Good to see you. I just wanted to make sure, and I'm certain that you are on top of this, but when we're looking at the parking structure and coming off of that bike ped bridge, how to integrate the bike off-ramps into a bike plan that cuts all the way through the U District and connects into the downtown bike plan. And I'm waiting to see that. I'm not sure it's been finalized, but I'm hoping that's being well coordinated.
Yeah, the students are just starting their work, and Colin Quinn-Hurst is one of the four of us that are meeting biweekly with those students, and definitely we want to make sure that the master bike plan for the downtown gets integrated, with thoughtfulness, with bikes coordinating to the downtown to the west and Gonzaga to the north, and it needs to be an integrated, thoughtful plan, definitely, and it needs to have a priority over parking.
Councilwoman Kinnear.
Hi, Juliet. Haven't seen you for a while. Hope you're doing well. I have a question, actually more of a comment about more micro-housing, more housing around the U District and wanting street-level activation, and it's kind of a chicken and egg thing. So the people who are going to put in more restaurants, coffee shops, entertainment are going to need some assurance or guarantee or reassurance that there is going to be bodies that are going to actually come and use their businesses, and that means more housing. So perhaps those could occur in tandem, where you have mixed-use development, so then you're assured that the businesses are actually going to have people that are going to patronize them.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Lori. And I think most of those developers, I know Dean Pepe and Boxcar are definitely interested in more mixed-use developments. That said, you can look across the downtown right now and see the vacant storefronts everywhere. And so I think we're also trying to get creative on how we could also, as a public development authority, almost support like business incubation on some of those ground floor leases. They're not going to be cheap leases, but maybe there could be some sort of public-private partnership to really allow businesses to launch and get started. I know Jim Frank has been fantastic in that regard with Kendall Yards. He's basically done a business incubation all along, that main street within Kendall Yards, and that's why he's had such great success with his businesses. So, yeah, it is a chicken and egg, and there's a lot to be kind of discussed and figured out with that. Thank you for that.
Any other questions? Councilwoman Wilkerson.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Juliet. So all this activity in the U District, just in conversations, have those developers looked at any other areas around Spokane that just might have came up in conversation?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I have been just representing the UDPDA, and I've only been since the middle of July. And so they're definitely hitting me up about the south sub area primarily right now. So, yeah, I haven't responded about other areas of the city, but I do think I have had some conversations with some other housing organizations that I've been in contact with when I lived in Portland. One is the Hacienda CDC, who does a lot of really great affordable and worker housing, primarily for the Latinx community in Portland. But they're really starting to look at Spokane as well as a whole, and at worker affordable housing here. So yeah, that they are the main group that I've heard that's talked about the whole of Spokane. So
Thank you. It's just encouraging to know that it's more than just one area of the city, but the entire city that's under consideration.
Yeah.
Juliet, I just wanted to say thank you for the update and the presentation. I've been deficient in trying to find a time to meet with you as well, so hopefully I'll rectify that soon. I appreciate the emphasis on the residential stuff going on, especially in that South UD area, and your help with Boxcar. I've tried to facilitate a couple meetings with them to get things going on that road project, so that's great that there's some progress happening there. I would just say on the parking, I think once we can figure out a way to make that parking happen, that's going to help to be a catalyst too for more residential and more mixed use in particular. And I hope that there will be some consideration for doing that either in a public-private partnership so that we can have some mixed use as part of that garage, or build it into a development that might not otherwise have a parking garage built into it. I just think that'd be a good way to consider that. So anyway, just throwing that out there for food for thought.
No, I appreciate that. And one of the parking scenarios we're looking at, well, all of them have ground floor activation, but a couple of them also look at mixed use housing above the parking garage as well, or adjacent to. So.
Fantastic, awesome. Well, thank you very much. I know we need to move on, and I see Heather Rosentrader from Avista is on. I don't see Letitia. I also have her on my agenda as well. But Heather, I don't know if you're ready. I thought we would skip to you so you guys could do your presentation.
I would be happy to. And we must have had some mixed signals. Letitia, since I was going to be on vacation, I had offered Letitia, but then since we rescheduled it, so it'll just be me.
Oh, okay. Sounds great. Well, I'll turn it over to you and let you present.
Wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, and it's nice to see so many of you that I haven't seen in a while. So thank you for having me, and I'll go ahead and share my screen. I've got a few slides here to help tell the story of our heat event that we experienced back in June. So my intent today is to give more background on how we prepared for the event, what happened during the event and why, and how we were managing the event as well, and doing our very best to reduce the impact to customers, and then things that we've done since the event in June to reduce the potential of it happening even again this summer. We had another heat wave in the July-August timeframe, and so we were able to apply a lot of learnings from this to not have any, outages during that event, and then also what we're preparing for in the future to minimize the risk of this happening, next summer and into the future, and how we're changing some of our planning assumptions, as well as highlighting some of the things that we have been working on for actually many years on the grid edge, that are some of our not standard, I guess, utility, load growth, build a substation type of things, but more at the edge of the grid, and even things we're doing in the university district to test out things like microgrids and demand response, and integrating the storage aspects of buildings to help minimize these kinds of events in the future, and to just support growth on our system in an affordable way, and support sustainability as well. So I'll go ahead and move into some of the slides that I have. Before I get into a lot of the details, it can get kind of technical pretty quickly, and so before I get into that, I like to acknowledge when we're working through these types of events, we're thinking about the customers. We understand the hardships that any kind of either planned or unplanned outages have on our customers, and so that is very much top of mind when we're predicting these kind of heat events or even storms coming up that we're preparing for. We're really have it top of mind that we want to do our best to minimize that hardship for our customers. And so there's a lot of things that we look at there. And actually, Letitia was sharing with me before this that there's some efforts that she's working with some entities with the city of Spokane around vulnerable populations and doing coordinated planning efforts for in the future to minimize, those hardships, especially for our most vulnerable customers. And we know that there's a lot of entities with the city that have those same goals, and so she's actively reaching out and coordinating with those entities to help be better prepared in the future as well. So to move into the slides that I have, I want to start on the supply side because the events had been referred to as rolling blackouts. And when people reference rolling blackouts normally, they're referencing the supply side, not having enough energy or generation to serve customers. And so they are able to move those outages to various customers in a community to even out the impact more because it's on the generation side is the issue. I want to make it clear from the beginning though, this was not caused by a generation issue. This was capacity constraints, equipment issues on the distribution system. So we didn't have the ability to spread around where those outages were occurring. And when we saw the forecast, as I know we had a lot of advance warning in terms of what was coming our way with those extreme heats and the prolonged extreme heat. And so both on our generation side, our energy supply side, on our transmission side, and our distribution side, there were a lot of efforts to prepare for that. And on the generation side, this first slide just shows it wasn't just the heat, but the drought that we all know we experienced in our region this year, and that continued to get worse as the summer came upon us. And so it was, even before June, we were getting predictions on the supply side that it was going to be challenging from a precipitation in our hydro resources, as well as impacting the cost when you have those kinds of conditions. So we had been watching it closely for months before. You can see some of these are, looking at the April timeframe and noting that we had that drought coming. So there was a lot of eyes on this. And then going to the next slide, we saw that here as this June event at the end of June came closer, we looked at even more items on the supply side. We looked at purchasing additional power in anticipation of that increased load and to minimize the market price volatility that usually comes with these heat events. We coordinated with our power plants to identify various contingencies and how we would respond to those contingencies to ensure that we could serve our customers. What was again unique about this, one of the many things that was unique about this event being in June is we normally have our generation units, that's a maintenance window that we have because we don't see usually those extreme heat events in June. And so we had several of our units that were out for maintenance, and we focused on getting those units returned from that scheduled maintenance as quickly as possible so that they could be online before we experienced those peak usage days. And then we were also, our supply side was coordinating with some of our large customers, and Inland Empire has been a great partner with us in the past and also supported a load reduction option for us that we did take advantage of during this June heat event as well to help support ensuring we had enough energy to supply our customers. So we didn't have any issues on the supply side. We had enough energy and capacity to serve our customers even in these unprecedented demand that we experienced, but it did create an additional focus on just resource adequacy into the future as we see additional plants that may be decommissioned and bringing on more intermittent generation supplies just continue to reinforce that review and analysis of having resource adequacy into the future. Definitely had a lot of attention in our region as we experienced this, and really strengthened the importance of reliability for our customers and affordability as we continue moving forward with our clean electricity goals. So looking to where we did experience the challenge, it was on our distribution system. And again, we saw the heat wave coming. We recognize on our distribution system as well that when we have prolonged high heat days, it really stresses our system. And so we had a lot of eyes on the previous week, eyes on our system, doing switching to some of the main switching that we do during these kinds of events is switching, balancing between circuits. So we have adjacent circuits that are connected together with an open switch usually, and we can look and determine what the forecasted loading will be on both of those circuits. And if one circuit's going to be more lightly loaded than another, then we can move where the open switch is and we can move some of that load to a more lightly loaded circuit. And so a lot of that work was done in advance. We also do feeder balancing, and that means between the phases, we have 3 phases on each of our circuits. We have A, B, and C phase, and so between those phases, they aren't always balanced equally, so we also move load from one of those phases to another phase. So those are 2 of our main tools that we have on the distribution system to offload equipment is the feeder balancing and then the phase balancing. So our teams were working on that in advance and executed on a lot of that. And there were a lot of areas that were heavily strained that didn't result in outages. And so most of that pre-event switching was successful. We also had pre-operations coordination meetings the week before and the Monday morning that we experienced the start of the event, and we had a press release that went out to make a request for conservation from our customers as a whole. So looking at what actually happened and why we weren't able to predict that we were going to experience those customer outages. We all know it was historic heat. We knew that was coming. Because it was historic heat, it's hard to assess all of the infill, how many customers have maybe purchased air conditioning since the last time we had a heat event. We also design our system assuming some diversity in use, assuming that those air conditioners are going to be cycling and not all of the air conditioners, on a circuit are going to be on at exactly the same time. And because we don't want to overbuild our system, we're sensitive to costs and affordability. And so we want to right size the equipment that we have serving our customers. And so using historical assumptions, we assume that there'll be some diversity in when those air conditioners are cycling. And I think most of you that have air conditioners recognize that there wasn't a lot of cycling going on, to keep the homes cool when we got up to the 109, 110 degrees. And so we weren't able to take advantage of that diversity in use. On the heat events versus a really cold event, our equipment gets derated. And so it's rated to be at 100% of its nameplate rating, maybe at the 90-degree level. And so once every degree it goes up above that, it gets derated. So we have these record high temperatures that are causing record high usage, but then we're also experiencing a derating of our equipment at that same time. And then even though the temperature we experienced on Monday, it got up to 106 degrees, was the time that we needed to start having the unplanned outages, that we had experienced 106 degrees back in 2018, I believe, and the loads didn't come anywhere near what they were on these circuits this year. So again, same temperature as what we had experienced before, but the loads were much higher than we had seen previously. And, you know, some of that was due to, we believe, the pandemic. People will say, well, that you experienced that last year in terms of movement of people working from home. And we just really didn't have a heat event last year that tested the system. We experienced this year, the issues were on our residential feeders, where historically during a weekday, we're looking at more of those commercial or business areas are where we see the peaks on our system for those circuits. And that customer load movement due to the pandemic and people working from home was a part of stressing our system in a different way that was unexpected. And, you know, you can see here just that it was a 1 in 1,000 year event that was causing the heat in June. And another item that piled on top of all of these, in June, you have an extra hour of sunlight compared to August. And again, that's when we normally have experienced our peak days is in the July-August timeframe. So it was all of these things layered on top of each other, which caused the issue that we experienced. And so we saw that with our load itself. Historically, we've been more of a winter peaking utility, and we get that added rating to our equipment in the winter time. So it doesn't stress the equipment as much when we have these kinds of peaks in the winter. But we just bumped out our previous winter peak that was 2,379 megawatts with this new summer peak of 2,381 megawatts that we experienced, I believe, on June 29th of this year. So a question that, you know, I've had, I know many of others have had, is how did we not see this coming? I can tell you on Monday morning when we met with our engineers, our operators who are watching the system, and the areas of the system that they were specifically concerned about turned up not to be the areas that we had the issues. You can see from these charts, this chart here that shows, again, back in 2018, we saw our Beacon substation is where we have our kind of system temperature that we use for our system. And so it was 105 degrees on August 10th in 2018. And so you can see those blue bars would be, you'd expect some customer growth in some areas, but the areas that we actually experienced the outages for the most part were more of our mature neighborhoods, not the areas that we have a lot of growth. And so when we forecast, you know, future loads for areas, we're not assuming this kind of growth, you know, in a couple years in those more mature neighborhoods. So it really was the layering of all of these things on top of each other that caused these areas to jump so significantly on that June 28th day, even though the temperature when these loads were seen was at 106 degrees, so, you know, 1 degree higher than we saw with those blue bars. And so we had, this shows 3 transformers in 2 of our circuits that were the areas that had issues. We actually had 1 more transformer that had an issue, but on our transformers, we monitor the internal oil temperature to determine when we need to shed load to reduce the risk of a catastrophic failure. And, you know, the reason that we do that preemptively is because if we ran it to failure, then the outages would be much more extreme and, you know, widespread and prolonged. And so we have an operating procedure to monitor the internal oil temperature to shed load before we would see a catastrophic failure of that equipment. And so these 3, actually the Waikiki and the Northeast, you know, before it saw the internal oil temperature at the temperature that we start shedding load, almost met its, you know, at 100% of what we were expecting. Both the Sunset transformer, and then there was another one of our other transformers, Fort Wright transformer. That the Fort Wright transformer actually had error with its temperature sensor. And so we thought we had internal oil temperature that was too high. On the end of the beginning of the second day, we were able to fix that problem. And so we were it had enough capacity that we didn't have to shed load on it the second or third day. But the Sunset transformer is an older transformer itself. We're in the middle of replacing, installing a new substation, an entirely new substation next to it. It's already got the fence built and the footers ready for that equipment. So it was already known that this equipment wasn't necessarily operating at its full capacity. So it only got up to 91% of its capacity before the temperature sensor alerted us to shed the load. So going to I just have 3 slides here showing the day-by-day experience that on the first day, we had our system peak load of the 2,285. We had about 16,000 customers that were impacted by those 4 transformers that were served by those 4 transformers and those 2 circuits. You can see the area of town, it was mostly in Spokane with 1 circuit in our Lewiston area. We have about 350 circuits. And so, a lot of our system, even though it was stressed as well, didn't have these same issues. So our team focused on how could we reduce the length of the outages and the number of outages that we were experiencing on that Monday. They worked to predict the next day impacts so that we could communicate with customers and give some warning, and as well as minimizing the next day impacts. We had, as you can see, 15,000 customers here, and we're able to reduce that significantly for Tuesday, even though the load was higher and the temperature was higher on Tuesday. We focused on customer communication as well as media response. And then looking at what we saw on Tuesday, with that same focus of continuing to try to reduce the length and number of outages our customers experience, we were able to bring that customers number down to about a third of those that experienced outages on Monday. And like I mentioned, the peak temperature was 3 degrees higher on Tuesday than it was on Monday, and the system load was higher on Tuesday than Monday. We were able to proactively alert all of the customers that experienced the outage, but we're refining that as we went. So by the third day, you can see that we were able to bring the customers. Really, no one in Spokane experienced an outage, and we had about 600 customers in Lewiston that I think they experienced. One group of customers experienced 1 hour of outage, and then another group experienced 2 hours of outages that were split by that other group. The system peak load, again, it was very similar to the first day, but we were able to, through all of the work of analyzing the system and doing as much of that load shifting as we could, as well as the conservation. And that was the other unknown is, we were requesting conservation from customers. We didn't know exactly how much conservation we would see on the system. But we did have also partnerships with some schools and other entities to get some targeted load reductions that helped us to minimize the customers that were out. And then we were able to really hone in and refine the customers we were communicating to proactively to alert them that they may experience one of these preventative outages. So what are we doing about it? A lot. We had a lot of learnings from this. We stressed the system, which helped direct where our upgrades should go. We focused on, this last summer, luckily it looks like we're out of the woods from this summer perspective, but we knew that there could be other peak events in this last summer, and we did experience some, but we were able to take some of those lessons learned to make some changes on the system, and we didn't experience any of these outages for the rest of the summer. We're also looking at, next summer and beyond for a new substation. It takes at least 2 years, so we won't be able to get new substations that aren't already in the plan by next summer, but we have a lot of other feeder upgrades and things in process, recognizing that this load level has come sooner than our forecast had predicted. So we're moving a lot of those projects forward. We're re-looking at our planning assessments, our distribution system planning assessments. Historically, we've assumed 104 degrees as our peak system day, looking at what the equipment ratings are at 104 degrees for those peaks. So that's something we're reassessing, is what should that number be that we're putting into our models to determine what kinds of upgrades we need to design on our system. We're looking at using all of the smart metering data that we have to advance our feeder balancing system in a program in a proactive way, as well as operational planning. We have the ability to determine with our smart metering data air conditioning adoption, and be able to better identify when we do see some of these peaks, what load may show up that isn't showing up on an average temperature day. And then related to some of those major equipment issues, like with the sunset transformer, just continuing to look at our maintenance programs and ensuring that the cooling is operating properly on our transformers, and things like our temperature sensors are giving us accurate information. So continuing to update our maintenance and equipment utilization programs. And then I thought I'd also just highlight, even though there's been a lot that we've learned from this that we're applying, we've had a lot going on to support these kinds of challenges that we know are coming our way for a long time, related to there's a lot of technology on the edge of the grid with demand response and coordinating with large buildings and large users of energy to be able to react in these kinds of situations in a more coordinated and planned way. And so the things that we've been doing around automating our grid, putting automated switches on our grid that we started back in 2013, things we're doing with Urbanova, and things we're doing in the University District, learning, putting more solar on the system, figuring out how we can coordinate with that solar, as well as learning more about how we can coordinate with storage systems, both battery storage as well as thermal storage in the buildings. And so with what we're doing in the University District, we have 2 Clean Energy Fund projects that are active in the University District in this area, a shared energy economy pilot that we actually we're coordinating with Washington State University and many others, but we just commissioned a system just about 2 weeks ago that we saw one of the Washington State University buildings islanded using the battery storage that was on site and the solar that was on site, and coordinating the building management system loads with that storage and generation, and truly islanded it from the grid, which was a pretty exciting test to see succeed. It's been many years in the making. We just finished up our Washington Advanced Metering project, so we've got our much better data and visibility into the system now that we have that installed. And with the South Landing Eco District building, there was an EDO article in the paper just this weekend that was talking about the grid interactive efficient buildings that will very much help be a solution to these kinds of challenges into the future, and hopefully help support these solutions from an affordability perspective and a sustainability perspective. So that's what I had to share today, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Heather, thank you very much.
Just a quick comment. First of all, thank you, Heather. And I kept hearing the word historic, and I know that we all felt it, but I just want to acknowledge Avista doing what we have not done, and that's evaluating how it went and how we can make things better. So I appreciate Avista's continued leadership in that area and many other areas in the city. And I'm just thinking that we can learn from how, if we go back and evaluate what we did right, what we did wrong, how we could be better prepared as a city to meet the needs, because I believe it'll probably come again, possibly in our lifetime.
Thanks, Commissioner Wilkerson.
Hi there. I just was wondering if Avista, sometimes they have rebates for certain things that you might put in. Is there maybe a model out there for air conditioners for rebates for folks or people who qualify for fans or rebates? It just seems to me that we had so many people die and go to the hospital this year that it would be something to look into if that would be possible.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I think that I will talk to Letitia Hill and the work that she's doing, you know, the coordinated effort to support our vulnerable populations to make sure that that's being considered. Thank you.
Any other questions? Heather, I would just share, where we live up north, we experienced that outage on the first day, and I think it was up for a little over 2 hours, maybe 3, something like that. And it was pretty incredible how fast the temperature inside the house rose. I mean, it pretty darn quick. And so for folks that maybe didn't have a alternative place to go or just a way to keep cool or something, I mean, that was pretty tough. So I guess I would ask, based on the what you guys learned and the upgrades you're planning, if this was to happen again, I mean, even next year, I know you said it would take 2 years for a new substation, but just with the upgrades and what you've learned, do you think that we would avoid this again a year from now if it happened kind of in a similar way?
That's my expectation. That's what I've given my team as the goal. And as I mentioned, we, even this summer I can't remember if it was the end of July or early August, we experienced, I think, 2 or 3 days that were around 106, 105, 106. And we, that chart that I showed of our transformers up at the 100%, I was texting with our operators, all throughout that, okay, where are we at? How's our equipment looking? And they made one load switch throughout, but even after that switch, all of our equipment, they said none of our transformers were over 80% loaded. So, the work that the team did, even from the learnings from June to just a month later, really helped manage the system and reduce that strain. And that would absolutely be my expectation, is that we were doing the things on the system that would minimize the risk of this happening again.
Okay. Thank you so much. I don't see any other hands up, so I'll just say thank you again for the presentation.
Councilor Cathcart, Marlene, did you have your hand up, or that was an accident?
No, I did. I just wanted to mention, Heather talked about partnerships. We were happy to partner with Avista too, as we looked at substations, or our pump stations and things, and went on generator in a couple instances to allow residential customers to keep access to their power during that. And we are working, Doug Kelly and others have reached out to us and talking about how we can be part of the solution on that. So we're happy to be part of that team as well.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, I would like to jump ahead a little bit and have Kyle come on if he's ready. Time is a little short, and I just want to make sure some of this stuff we get to, and I know his is important. So, Kyle, are you ready to go?
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilman. I just want to provide everybody an update on the landslide that we're mitigating down in Peaceful Valley at Clark Avenue here, and a couple of items that are going to come through for council approval as they relate to the abatement of that landslide and the work to stabilize that hillside coming into winter here. So on tonight's, or on the advanced agenda for this afternoon, there's an SBO that will be presented for your approval. This is the SBO that will fund the emergency contract to perform the work to do the full mitigation of the slide work. It's a $2.1 million SBO. And what the scope of the project is going to look like is removing the remaining tree stumps so that we can get up onto the hillside, and we'll be installing geotechnical soil nails on our property in order to, basically pin the whole hillside down right through the slide plane itself. And then the other big scope of work is replacement of that retaining wall. So that stacked basalt wall has failed, and we will be installing a new wall. It's called an MSE wall, and that is, it's going to be those ready rock blocks. So it'll have kind of that faux rock facing to it that has tie-back fabric that goes back into the hillside. So it'll give you a real nice structural wall to work with under there. We have met on site with FEMA representatives and worked with them to get the different pieces of the scope to fit within their program, because there's kind of some different potential funding mechanisms, whether it's restoration work versus mitigation work. But they were very pleased with everything we've done. We did a couple extra steps along the way with a second cultural resources review focused in on that hillside, as well as conversations with the State Historic Preservation Office just to make sure our T's were crossed and our I's were dotted. Everything's looking pretty good. I think our likelihood of receiving a significant chunk of that money back from FEMA is very, very high. So the SBO will be briefed this afternoon. I'll give that briefing and then hopefully voted on next week. We'll get the contract moving forward. It's an emergency contract, so that won't actually go onto the agenda. And we are hoping, I haven't gotten the final schedule from the contractor. We're moving a bunch of things, getting the parts ordered that we need for the drilling, but very, very soon you're going to see work down there. I was hoping to get a response back before the meeting today on the exact start date. I don't have it. I think it'll be within a week though. And we'll get moving dirt and get that hillside stabilizing as we start to see this wet weather come in, which is certainly a concern for us. So we want to get up there. We'll be building access roads on the hillside, and we'll start at the top and work our way down with those soil nails to pin the hillside in. And then we'll finish up by building the wall at the end. Our goal is to get all this done before we get into winter. It'll go probably past the paving season, but we should be able to get this all done by the end of the year, at least the lion's share of it, to make it safe. And we'll see. I don't know exactly what the condition of the street is going to be like when we're all done here. If you recall, we had to kind of leave this portion of the project out, but I'm going to do everything I can to get Clark Avenue open for the winter time, as long as it's safe to do so. The other piece of this that's going to come through, maybe next week, it might be the following week, is a pair of reimbursement agreements. So as you know, the landslide occurred both on the city's owned parcel as well as a private parcel. So with our current contract, we can't do it, and we wouldn't do any work on the private property. The only work on private property that the city is funding is the rebuilding of the retaining wall, because that is a right-of-way retaining wall that is a city asset. But no further work on that private property will be done with any of the potentially reimbursable funds. However, the property owners have been engaging with us and working. So this is both the property owner of the parcel right below, as well as the condo association for the building that is above the private parcel that is of most concern. And they do want to participate in the solution out here. So they would be I will be bringing forward reimbursement agreements that would be for work that they want to have our contractor do on their property. So in essence, we can pay the contractor and they can reimburse us afterwards. Those would go on to the South Gorge Trail contract, because we have to keep the FEMA reimbursable contract completely separate from the South Gorge Trail. But we do, personally, I'm really excited that they are choosing to do this. It's certainly their choice. And they're going to be investing significantly to stabilize that hillside as well, so that everything is all said and done in one fell swoop. So expect to see those soon as well. And I'll need to do an admin reserve increase on the project to make sure that we can tuck in those reimbursement agreements. But those will be 100% reimbursable on a repayment plan. And then you'll see the FEMA contract as well. I have one other thing I need to mention, but I want to stop there because that's everything landslide related, and just check in if there's any questions or any further details that I can provide on any of those topics. Council President.
Yeah, so totally understand the plan for stabilization, and that all sounds good. I think in some of us discussing it is where the funds come from. Right now, it's set on the SBO to come from our contingency reserve, and I think some of us are wondering whether or not it could come from our risk management reserve instead of that. And I know you're not the person to answer that question, but I'm just bringing that up here so that when we get the briefing today, maybe somebody, I think Mike Ormsby is the risk management person, and then Tanya is obviously our Chief Financial Officer. So if you could talk with them about addressing that, because I think we don't want to go into the contingency reserve if we can help it, and it's arguably a risk management issue. So just wanted to convey that.
Thank you for the heads up. I'll try to get a hold of them between now and briefing this afternoon, and we'll try to get that answer for you. And if we need to make a pivot, then we can talk about that on the dais.
What was your other item?
I just had one other item, and it was a last-minute addition, and I sent out an email on this last week, but we have that Cochrane conveyance project that we opened bids on last Monday, and I was going to make a request this afternoon at the 3:30 briefing for a suspension of the rules such that we could brief and vote today on that project. And the reason for this is because this specific project has a large quantity of a particular type of pipe that is seeing a crazy volatile market this year. It's been unavailable. We've seen prices just doing this all year long, even if we could get the pipe. And the suppliers, what used to give us 30 to 60 to 90 days price guarantees, are giving us a week. So our best chance of, we got a great price on the project and a great pipe price right now. So it just would kind of be a little financial insurance for us to execute the contract as quickly as possible and lock in that piping, so we can get the material approved, order, lock it in, get it on site. So that's the request I plan to make at 3:30. I just want to make sure I had a chance to explain that and see if there were any additional questions on that item as well.
Any questions from anybody? Okay, thank you, Kyle. We'll learn more if there's more to learn in briefing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Inga, let's go to you with the speed limit resolution.
Okay, I'm trying to share my screen. And screen one. Okay. So this is an update of the speed schedule that we maintain for all of the school zones in the city. And the reason for this update came when we were reviewing the plans for the two new middle schools and realized that we needed to establish new speed 20 zones for their crosswalks. So at the same time, we figured we should go through and do an update of all of the speed zones and review them all to make sure they're all correct. And so we found a few other edits that needed to be made as well. So I'm going to go through the major ones, and then if you have any questions, you can just let me know. This is what the Exhibit A looks like, which I believe was attached in your packet. So if anyone has specific questions, feel free to look through it and send me an email if you're, questioning any of the boundaries in there. But generally what it includes is a summary of all of the school speed zones, and then also a summary of all of the park speed zones. So the school speed zones were last updated in 2019, which is when the Schedule A was established. And then there were a pair of resolutions that went through in 2020, where council established those 20-mile-per-hour zones at the parks. Those were not adopted into Schedule A, so I'm just kind of going back and putting them all into one place and cleaning it up so it's easier for people to come back and reference. So the first one that is a new school is the Denny Yasuhara Middle School.
And for this one, we are establishing a new 20 zone on Marietta Avenue, which is between the Logan Peace Park, which is a little neighborhood park there, and Perry Street at the east end of it. There will be a crosswalk where the arrow is, right next to the Logan Peace Park. That will be for the students coming from the south. And then on Perry Street, there's already an existing school zone for Logan Elementary, which you can kind of see in the southwest corner of your screen. Those students cross at Jackson right now. And so what we discussed doing was just tying that school zone into one. And we're just going to extend it to the north. It'll have flashing beacon units that are set up to run for both of those arrival and departure periods. And so it'll just function for both schools. And so for the middle school students, they will have a marked crosswalk at Marietta Avenue. And then we lengthened it just to where the northern end of probably the parent drop-off zone would be on Perry Street. The next one is Pauline Flett Middle School. This is the one over by Joe Albee. And for this one, we are setting up a zone on Wellesley Avenue. The crosswalk for the school is going to be located at Royal Court, which is the most direct route for most of the students to walk up to the school. We looked at doing one at Hartley as well, but after talking with the school district, we felt that was too far to the west and most of the students would probably gravitate towards this crosswalk. So this should capture most of the parents as they circle through on the drop-off side, which will be on Wellesley, and then they'll see the 20 zone as they come back out and head towards Assembly. Sacagawea, which is in for plan review right now. This one is not needed just yet, but we're looking at incorporating it into this so we don't have to come back later and do it. They want to have a new 20-mile-per-hour zone on, oh shoot, I don't have the name of the street there. The street that's on the west side of the school boundary there. And there is not one there now, but with the way the site is going to be oriented, they will probably have some parents using that as the drop-off zone and probably students walking in from the west. And so we thought that was probably a good idea to set that up. The zone on Grand would not be modified. We've been talking quite a bit with the school district about this. They want to maintain their existing crosswalk at 33rd Avenue because it functions, I guess, for both Jefferson Elementary and for the middle school students. And so for now, we're going to leave that in place. We're going to have to move the beacon just a little bit because their new driveway is going to be right at the intersection with 32nd. So we're going to have to relocate their existing flashing beacon to the north a little bit, but it's not going to be a substantial amount, probably 100 feet or less. And then GPREP, they asked for this as part of the school safety and traffic calming program, Cycle 9. They were approved to get a 20-wind flashing unit on Perry, and so they need a corresponding 20-mile-per-hour zone to be established for that. So those are all the major changes. If you have any questions, I can take those.
Any questions for Inga? Councilwoman Kerr.
Inga, thanks for that. I think it's important that we remind motorists that there are children around schools, obviously, and parks. And I'm wondering, didn't look carefully at the parks list. Are you including just the parks that council passed by resolution, or are you going further into that realm, including all parks?
I didn't make any changes. I just copied what was done with those two resolutions.
Okay, and I would say that because it was a pilot when we initially did it, and the pilot will end in December, we might want to do just a brief overview of what worked, what didn't. I'm thinking of High Drive right now, and we have had so many emails, both pro and con, around that 20 mile an hour along High Drive. So I'd like to be a little bit flexible when it comes to parks, and perhaps get together with you offline and discuss how to go forward with the park piece, how we do that and still incorporate a review, because it was a pilot. So we just have something to look at that says, yeah, this is working and here's how we know it's working, or this doesn't work.
Okay,
yes. However that looks for you.
All right, yeah, let's do that.
Okay, any other questions? I am not seeing any hands. All right. Thank you very much, Inga. Appreciate that. We'll move on to the Stormwater SMC. And we are running a little short on time, so if it's at all possible to be a little quicker than maybe expected with the presentations, that'd be great.
Hi, my name's Trey, and I speak very quickly. Let me make sure that you guys are seeing my screen.
I was, but it went away.
Okay. I think you should be seeing it at this point.
There we go.
Okay. My name's Trey George. I work in the wastewater management department. I'm the city's permit coordinator for our stormwater permit. That's our municipal stormwater permit, not to be confused with the combined sewer overflow permit, which is at the wastewater plant. So this is for stormwater only. I'm proposing some updates to our ordinances as mandated by our permit. Real quickly here, a little background. Stormwater runoff is the #1 water pollution problem in urban areas of our state in accordance with ecology. And I just want to make the note that stormwater gets a bad rap. Stormwater is the carrier of the pollution, but not the source of the pollution. But ultimately, if it's carrying pollution, where it ends up becomes polluted. So we have a permit system that ecology issues permits to municipalities. We are the recipient of this permit, Eastern Washington Phase 2 Municipal Stormwater Permit. This is our permit number, and the permit area is the entire incorporated area of the city, with the exception of the CSO basins. The permit authorizes the city and its citizens to discharge stormwater to waters of the state of Washington. And for us, that's the river, and that's our aquifer. A permit condition is that we must treat stormwater prior to discharge where practicable. And so there's an ordinance that I'm going to touch on here in a few minutes where we talk about treatment and inspections. So that's why I wanted to bring it up early. The purpose of this update is to comply with the Eastern Washington permit. We want to provide clarity in the ordinances to some language that needs some clarity. And then ultimately, we're doing this to protect water quality for our local waters of the state. The legislative process that I'm going through with y'all is I've been to the Planning Commission, and they've provided a recommendation, and I'm presenting here today to PIES. And then I'm on schedule, I believe, for the council on October 25th. If I'm not on schedule yet, I'm getting there. I've made the request. This is a very general timeline. We sent the letter out to affected known property owners from our permit list that we created from our permits that we've issued for COs. The Planning Commission here, and then the PIES Committee, and then October 25th, the City Council with this extended public comment period. We've reached out to the public or made ourselves available. We submitted a SEPA for the DNS initially. We put up a stormwater webpage, which you can find on our stormwater webpage. It has another sub-page as an ordinance page. We put out a blog that was out 2 weeks ago, and we put the public notice ads as required for the Planning Commission. And as mentioned, we sent a notification letter to 350 or so properties, and we've been receiving feedback on those. And then we will post public ads for council. And so we've tried to get the word out to get comment back, and we have gotten some comment back. I'll jump right in here with these, and I'll go pretty quickly. If you need to stop me, please do. The first update is that we're going to add the Eastern Washington Stormwater Manual, which is an ecology manual, as a reference in the code. It's a commonly used manual. It's the manual that our regional stormwater, Spokane Regional Stormwater Manual is based off of. In fact, our permit requires us to get a technical equivalency with this manual. So we're just adding the reference to the code. The second one here is the duty of property owners. We want facilities that are built in Spokane to adhere to the Spokane Regional Stormwater Manual, which is an existing manual that's been in place since 2008, and the Stormwater Management Manual for Eastern Washington. Again, these are both industry standards. and they're what our developers and engineers lean on for their designs. And so we're just codifying that property owners should use these in their designs for the permits that they seek. Illicit discharges. An illicit discharge is anything that goes into a storm drain that's not stormwater, unless it's conditionally approved, like air conditioner condensate. So we are putting into the ordinance a requirement for facilities, commercial and industrial facilities, to use BMP's, best management practices, to eliminate illicit discharges. It's simply saying that it's something that we require already in our permitting process through developer services. This is just codifying the statement. This one here, plan required, the top one. The city currently requires an erosion and soil control plan or erosion sediment control plan. There's another plan called a stormwater pollution prevention plan that's required by ecology whenever the construction site is greater than 1 acre. And so the city, we expect to receive that we call it a SWIP, whenever our construction sites are larger than 1 acre in the city, but it's not codified, and so this is codifying that requirement to provide the SWIP plan for projects that are greater than 1 acre. And again, this is not something new for the developer. This is something they already are doing to meet ecology's permit. So the middle one here, minimum plan requirements, to include plans to be consistent with the Stormwater Management Manual for Eastern Washington, to satisfy all known available reasonable methods of prevention, control, and treatment requirements. That last slew of words is an acronym called ACART. You've probably heard of it if you've been having stormwater discussions. This is just adding the language that says we're all going to follow the ACART approach. This last one here, I'm going to spend a little bit of, no, not this one, here's the next one. This last one on this page, to include the requirement to have project sites with a high potential for sediment transport to be inspected prior to clearing or grading. This is commonly done already, but it's not done everywhere that I'm aware of. This is language right from our permit. The idea is that you go and you inspect the site before you clear and grade. It seems pretty logical and pretty straightforward. So it's pretty simple, I think, and to get it in there. This one here I would like to spend a little bit of time on. This is the last one. This one is going to require the most effort for the city, as far as changes, and it is requiring something of private property owners that have applicable sites. We are requesting to include an ordinance that requires an annual post-construction inspection and certification by a third party for stormwater facilities on private properties. And so these are facilities that were, when the project was larger than 1 acre, and they have a post-construction stormwater facility, which is a swale or a pond, something to that effect, then we want those inspected annually, and then the certification sent to the city for our records retention. The water department currently does this with their backflow preventers. That's the program that they use, and we're modeling this after that program. Regional Health does something very similar with septic tanks. It's a requirement in our permit that we have these inspected, and this is the approach that we've come up with. It's an option within the permit. Specifically, the ordinance says, any stormwater facility shall be inspected annually by a qualified stormwater professional. Private property owners or other responsible person, authorized and designated entity shall provide annual certification by a qualified third party that adequate maintenance has been performed and the facilities are operating as designed to protect water quality. That's a lot of words for saying that if you have a swale on your property, you need to maintain it, and we need to have an inspector come and certify that you're maintaining it and it's functioning. A qualified stormwater professional means they're licensed to do business in the state of Washington, so this can be a vendor, a contractor, or a consultant. They possess the knowledge and skills to do the assessment and assess stormwater. And this can come in the form of having a professional geologist certification, a professional engineer, or what we call a CESOL, which is a stormwater, it's a stormwater specific certification, or it can also be applicable education and experience. So you don't have to have the professional certifications to be able to perform this service if you have demonstrable education and experience in the industry, stormwater industry. And so what does this maintenance entail? What are we asking people to certify? Well, to do maintenance, you got to keep your inlets clear so water can get into it. You need to remove sediment and debris so that the function of the stormwater facility maintains its integrity. And you got to keep the vegetation healthy. Vegetation is providing the treatment. It's helping provide the treatment to stormwater, so the vegetation must be healthy to do its work. You need to remove sediment and debris because over time it degrades and it plugs up the pore spaces in the basement of those facilities, and those facilities no longer infiltrate and they become little ponds, and that's not their design. Their ponds are designed as ponds. These swales are not meant to be ponds. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. It's a permit requirement that we ensure that these are happening. And I just wanted to give you a couple visuals on some good and some bad. On the top left here with the check mark is a really good-looking swale. It's well maintained. It has healthy vegetation, and clearly someone's put an effort into making sure this is functioning as designed. On the bottom right hand here is everything opposite of what I just said about the top left. It's full of sediment. It's crumbling. No one's giving it any attention. It doesn't meet the criteria. It's clearly not being maintained, and an inspector would fail this in a heartbeat. And so these are the examples and models that we're trying to work with to get these third-party inspections incorporated into our code. My contact information, I've been receiving comments from our public outreach already via email, and you can reach me by mail as well. And with that, are there some questions I can entertain?
Councilman Kinnear.
Thanks, Trey. Thanks. I absolutely do support this with a caveat. And that is, please drive down Lincoln, South Lincoln, and look at the storm gardens there. They're not functional. And that was a city installed, designed, and at one point maintained, no longer maintained, stormwater garden system. So I would ask, and I see Marlene, I'm going to ask Marlene as well, that we look at Indiana, which had the same kind of attention. I think Broadway as well. So where we as a city have installed storm gardens and aren't maintaining them, we need to clean up our own house first before we ask the HOAs and the developers to go the extra mile and incur that extra cost. Because right now we have a situation that it's just not working. So those have to be inspected, cleaned out, whatever needs to be done every year as well. Thanks.
Thank you for your comment, and I completely agree with what you've said. We have to lead by example if we're going to have the expectation on the citizenry.
Councilman Stratton.
So I'll be quick. What happens if somebody fails inspection? Do we go back and is it education or trying to help them get up to those standards, or what do you do?
So education is where we start. We go out and we educate and we provide information and we answer questions, and then we'll follow up. And it does lead to enforcement if necessary, and we have enforcement provisions currently in the code. However, I will state that you guys may see me again in the future because I hope and plan to update the code in that respect as well.
Trey, do you know how many of these 1 acre parcels that we have, and how many people would be affected by this, and what the cost of an inspection would likely be?
Very good question. So going back through records over the last year, these are permit records that the city has in developer services. We identified approximately 350, and that includes all the PUDs. I added those to the list as well in the city. So about 350 at this point. The cost, I don't have a number, but I can provide you an estimated range, and it depends on the complexity of the facility. If it's just a simple swale on a property, it could be just a simple swale, or it could be a highly complex infiltration gallery with moving parts. And I think that range would be somewhere between $200 and $2,000. Probably on the lower end, because most of our facilities in our area are simple swales.
But potentially some folks could have an extra $2,000 bill every year as a result of this?
Well, yes, the short answer is yes. The longer real answer is that if you have a complex infiltration gallery on your site that's going to cost, in that higher range, then you are probably a large business or an industrial park. To assist the folks that are going to have to meet this requirement, I'm putting together a list without recommendation, but a list of local providers. I'm still getting feedback from providers I've solicited for some input. And so they haven't provided me any costs. I'm just asking if they can provide the service so I can put them on a list to make the property owner aware of where they can go for the service.
Okay, thank you. I think I don't see any more hands up, so we'll move on to our next item. Colin, I apologize. I don't think we're going to have enough time for your full presentation. I don't know if there's any action items related to what you're talking about, if it's something that we could postpone till our next PIES meeting or fit in another committee meeting, or if you want to just give a shortened version.
I'm wondering if Colin can at least give it a try, because we do owe a response back to Senator Billig on this issue that is somewhat urgent. He's pinged us a couple times, and so maybe he can give it a whirl.
Let's try to fit something in there. Great.
Okay, I'll set myself a little timer here and keep it short. I'll share my slides just so I can hit some high points here. But this is a recap of previous discussion we brought forward in August 2020 to Urban Experience with an update on the South U District Trail Study. So I won't go into too much detail about the conclusions of that study. Just a reminder that that originated because during Sprague Avenue 2, the resurfacing and reconstruction of that street, funding for that project was temporarily held pending an analysis of an east-west trail connection through the South U District from the University District Gateway Bridge. And it wasn't just funding for that project, it was funding for all city transportation projects coming from the state. At that time, an agreement was signed with Senator Billig and Mayor Condon and the City Council agreeing that the city would commit to exploring an east-west trail connection through the South U District and sign Sprague Avenue for as a shared route for bicycling. And so that study was a follow-up to this agreement to look into that trail option. The signage was installed. The trail was studied as a potential connection through the district, following up on a 2015 addition to the Bicycle Master Plan. And what we found looking through this study in the project area, a few critical challenges with this project. You can see that it parallels the railway there, and it actually all lies on BNSF property, and some of which is currently leased through long-term lease agreements up to 100 years. And so that's the critical challenge with this project alignment, as well as the terrain. There's some key challenges being right on that bluff right there. And we did explore a few different options, so different routes to get people through there. And we found that modifications to existing lease agreements would be necessary, going through parking lots, past swells, up steep terrain would be necessary. And so the bottom line, going through this trail design, going through a full concept design, was that we found some critical challenges that really made the conclusion that it's not really a feasible project. And one of those challenges with BNSF is that it would be through a lease agreement, which would be paying them annually for the right to use this alignment, which is a pretty rare or non-standard way of getting public right-of-way for a transportation purpose. It's not something we would usually consider doing. The other piece that came out of this process with the stakeholders was that we'd need to replace any parking lots through those parking lots, as there would be some lost spaces. So moving forward, a parallel option has emerged, and this was emerged through other processes, through a bike ped safety analysis that was done for a state DOT grant application last year that we applied for and that you were briefed on, which included crossing improvements at Division and Brown. And you know those flashing crosswalks there by the House of Charity, and they're really dangerous crossings. And so 3 other crossings were approved for funding through that grant application, but there was a lot of interest in this crossing as well. And we ended up proposing it as a neighborhood greenway improvement, as Pacific Avenue is currently in the Bicycle Master Plan as a bike-friendly route, and it provides connections from the University District Gateway Bridge area on Sherman into downtown, and also options for extending east. And you can see some of the current alignments, low speed, low traffic, but the crossings really are the key points. And there are options for connecting east down on Sprague Way under Hamilton using some of the design concepts from the trail study. And so you can see what our current bike master plan says, and what we'd like to look at doing is, well, there's currently a comp plan amendment going through this fall, which will come before you shortly, to upgrade that Pacific Avenue route from a bike-friendly route to a neighborhood greenway. which would include traffic calming elements and crossing improvements. So a higher level bike route, which is on par or in some cases better than a shared use trail, as recent research is indicating it can be safer. And what we'd like to do after that amendment, this current amendment, which upgrades Pacific Avenue, is to look at options for doubling down on that alignment on Pacific Avenue as a neighborhood greenway that connects west into downtown via Howard and east to the Sprague Union Business District, the Ben Burr Trail, and continuing on those bike-friendly routes through the Sprague District, it would connect with the Children of the Sun Trail, where it touches down by the Libby School. So it could be a true east-west bikeway and walking and biking connection. And so we'd like to look at that and come back and continue pursuing funding. And this isn't just a few sharrows, it's really signal improvements, bikeway improvements, protected intersection options, and ways to really make this a very safe route. This was included in the legislative request. It was one of the top 5 projects that went in on that list this year through City Council and the legislative team. And it was supported by the Bicycle Advisory Board. They preferred this option over the trail option. They felt it would connect better to destinations in the community and was a safer route that they appealed to them more. So we felt like the review was fulfilled by the feasibility study, and that by continuing to pursue a neighborhood greenway along Pacific with better connections than that initial study route, that we'd be following up on that agreement. And so probably longer than you wanted, but I just wanted to get through this real quick. So our proposal is to continue focusing on this, but also follow up with Senator Billig, confirming the conclusions that we found and really close that loop and propose some next steps and see where that conversation can lead. So
Colin, are you looking for specific feedback from council then related to this project?
Yeah, feedback would be great. I'd like to hear what you think of this approach.
Can you send this out to us? Can you email your PowerPoint out to us, and then we can get back to you?
Absolutely.
Perfect.
We'll include the draft letter too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Catherine. I don't see any other hands for any questions. I don't know if they're giving us the high sign in council chambers or not. Marlene, can you give a 1-minute quick update on the utility stuff real fast? Oh, we can't hear you.
Well, I'm sharing. That's what I was trying to tell you. Just quickly, our current delinquencies as of September 1 totals about $6.3 million. That's almost 7,500 accounts. That's both residential and commercial accounts, which you can see multifamily and residential make up the bulk of that, over $5 million worth of the amount owed to us. Our moratorium at the state level expires on September 30th, or at least that's the information we have today. Some customers have accrued large balances. Some 1,400 customers have missed every bill since February, and those customers account for about half of the past due amount. So we really need to move our customers from delinquency to current. This kind of shows you, these are the qualified census tracts we've talked a lot about with ARP funds, but about 40% of the delinquent amounts are in those tracts. So what we want to ask council to do is to consider a resolution that would provide a window for customers to get caught up following the expiration of the state moratorium, which would take us, we want to do 6 months, which would take us through March of 2022, leave late fees off through the end of November, continue to offer our interest-free payment plans and promote existing financial help. We do have the U-Help program. Rental assistance funds can be used for utilities as well as rents. So there's $31 million available within the city for that, so we would encourage people to use that. And we're also seeking other opportunities for bill assistance. There is some federal money coming down that's similar to Project Share for water and wastewater, so we're keeping an eye on that. We expect SNAP to be able to distribute that in our area. So going forward, Councilmember Cathcart, typically I have approval for Council President Beggs to be a sponsor. Since this is a resolution, can I add you as a second sponsor for that resolution? Perfect. So I'll drop that on the agenda so that you would consider it on the 11th to extend that flexibility for customers for 6 months.
Perfect. Any questions, Marlene? I am not seeing any. Thank you very much, Marlene. Will there be some additional information that you can provide that we could share? You know, just some notices about the changes and whatnot as we move forward towards that November 30 date.
Right. I wrote talking points for 311 that I will share with this group too, so that you can much of the information is on our website. We'll get you direct links and so forth if citizens contact you directly.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay. Well, I don't believe there's anything left on our agenda, and we're over time anyway, so we will adjourn, and I guess we'll be back in 25 minutes for briefing.